Today's episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Albert Lee Seed. Here at Back to the Roots, it is our goal to create connections with organic farmers across the country. Now we'd like to connect you with a leading provider of organic and non-GMO farm seed in Albert Lee Seed. Cover crops, forages, small grains, corn, and soybeans. Albert Lee Seed is helping organic and transitioning farmers diversify their crop rotations and create healthy herds, healthy soil, and healthy humans. Whether you're looking for organic oats for cover cropping, highly digestible alfalfa, or a 105-day non-GMO corn hybrid, Albert Lee has got you covered. In fact, they were the first farm seed company in the industry to offer guaranteed levels of non-GMO purity in their Viking corn and soybean line. Check out their website at www.alseed.com to see their farm seed lineup or to request a catalog. And thank you to Albert Lee Seed.
You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood today, we're sitting down with three representatives from Omsco in England, who Omsco is the Organic Milk Suppliers Cooperative, and they are also co-members of Organic Valley. And we are out here in La Crosse, Wisconsin at the annual meeting for Organic Valley producers, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down with us. And if you would just go through, introduce yourselves and a little bit what your role is within the co-op.
Okay, my name is Lyndon Edwards. I'm an organic dairy farmer and a board member for Omsco. I'm also the deputy chairman and I head the technical side of Omsco. Mm-hmm. And at home we're milking 250 predominantly Holstein cattle. And we do graze a lot of grass, and we also grow our own feed as much as possible, so we will grow barley and peas and sugar beet this year.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Tim Downs. I farm 2 hours north of Lyndon in Shropshire, also a board member. We farm on two sites, so 250 milking organic cows at home and another 220 at another farm 18 miles north. We've been organic now since 1998. I also sit on the RABDF, which is the Royal Association of British Dairy Farmers panel, and am lucky enough to be a Nuffield Scholar. And we've been members of Omsco for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Peter Bennett. I'm my title is the head of membership for Omsco, so I work for Omsco. I'm a dairy farmer by origin, but I work full-time for the company, and my title of head of membership means that I cover everything which relates to farmers and the milk supply, and anything that relates to our farmer members comes into my orbit.
Mm-hmm. So how many members are in Omsco?
We have 250 members.
250.
Yeah.
And how many of those would be shipping USDA certified organic milk versus
within the USDA pool? We have currently 43 members.
Okay.
Who are supplying that milk, and we're looking to increase the pool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the difference between the EU standard of organics and the USDA, is that a significant difference?
It's not a dramatic difference, but there are some differences on both ways. Certainly, with the equivalents that we operate to, the main element probably will be that young stock, for instance, don't come under the auspices of the antibiotic free until they get within 12 months of coming into the herd. Otherwise, there are some other differences which relate to sort of medications and things which are more specific to each country. So our veterinary medicines directorate would recognise some medicines that you perhaps would not, that you can recognise, but we wouldn't recognise.
There are a few other things that are slightly different as well. So one of our standards that we have to comply with is the minimum forage is always 60%.
Oh. 60%.
Yeah.
Forages.
Yes.
So just in feeding,
Grass,
that's
grass in season or forage in the winter.
not okay. Okay.
Now, that's the EU standard.
Yes.
And so do you use that standard on the USDA certified farms as well?
We do, yes.
Okay. So you're double
Yes.
certified there. So if you use the USDA standard, that seal, is that covered then to sell in the EU markets?
We
Or
don't,
do you double
We certify to the EU standard, and then a second certification to the USDA.
Okay.
So our members are double certified who are supplying into that.
Okay. Interesting. But the 60% forage is different.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, do you have to graze during the grazing season?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to graze whenever it is possible to graze. We have within Omsco a average grazing in excess of 225, 230 days.
Oh, wow.
So what would the climate be like where you guys are farming?
It's pretty wet compared to some of your parts over here. We would have turned our cows out at home this year on the 3rd of March. Usually, I would say normal turnout would be mid-March, and then ours will usually come inside sometime through middle of November.
We're a little bit more extreme than that. We calve all in one block in the spring, so we've calved over the last 6 weeks about 250 cows at home. They've all gone out from the 15th of February out to pasture during the day, and then into March when the weather is conducive to grazing, they'll go out at night time, and we'll just buffer or top up with silage. We also mentioned that we feed some fodder beet, which is a fantastic feed for the autumn to extend the milk production, and they love their little bit of sugar and high quality feed that balances the silage well. So we're out and out grazing, reducing the meal to a minimum, and aiming for 6,000 litres per cow, of which 4.5 from forage.
So your grazing season would be a little bit longer than from where I am in Ohio. It's generally April 15th to about the middle of November. So you would be a little bit longer than that.
Slightly longer, and end of November. The ground is starting to get muddy. We want to avoid poaching, but we've got a good infrastructure and systems of cow tracks, and we've recycled railway sleepers. 10,000 railway sleepers went down on one farm, so we've enabled us to have a good railway network of allowing access to pasture, and that's worked really effectively.
Mm-hmm. What is the average size of the farms within the co-op? How many cows would that be?
The average herd size would be just over 100 cows.
Okay.
But we have a broad spectrum, so we would range from 22, 23 cows up to probably about 550, 600 would be the biggest herd.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit bigger than the Organic Valley farms. I think our average is 72, something like that. And then what would the average acreage be on those farms? Are most farms, would you raise most of your own feed, or is it kind of all over the map? Some people buy everything in and others raise everything?
It's completely mixed. So some people will grow everything they feed, all of their concentrates as well, and other people will be just grassland farmers who would probably buy their concentrates in, some from neighbours or some from further away.
Yes, a lot of the members will be utilising all their grazing acres for their dairy herd, and will have their young stock reared on a second unit. And some areas are more adapted to growing cereals than others. So certainly, if you go into the west of the UK, it's much more grass-growing country rather than growing cereals.
Interesting. And the breeds are Holstein, Jersey, same thing we have here?
I think it's fairly similar. There's quite a few Holstein herds, a lot of crossbred herds, and some Jerseys as well. one of the things that Omsco did a little while ago is we stopped people having calves that weren't being used. So, for example, some of the Jersey farms didn't used to have any use for their male calves. Well, that's been stopped now. So some of those people are having looking at crossbreeding to actually give the calf a bit more value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've gone down the sex semen route, which has revolutionised how we produce our replacements in the early part of our calving block. Then that enables us to use the higher value beef genetics thereafter, which has a better market and also reduces the likelihood of having an animal that doesn't have a value on farm. And we have plenty of farm staff who do not want to be disposing of something that isn't of value, and we've never done that and wouldn't want to go down there. So we're using breeds such as Norwegian Red, New Zealand Friesian, Fleck V, which is a milking Simmental from Czechoslovakia, and avoiding Jersey for the reason that Lyndon said before. They don't produce a dual purpose crossbred animal. And we're also looking for the USDA premium pool has a requirement for high constituent value. I've milked out in New Zealand, and that's the way the whole world's supply chain is moving. So value for proteins and fats, and we want to have animals that are producing high quality milk.
Mm-hmm. And so you have a good market on the meat side for the dairy animals. That's why you're crossbreeding with a beef.
I wouldn't say it's a good market.
Okay,
Mark,
but there's
I'd say
a market.
It's better than
There is a
zero.
market, yes.
Better than a Jersey market?
Better
Yes.
than zero. Yes.
Because I think Jersey bull calves are worth about $10 right now in Ohio.
And the tag is $5 and the time and the milk. So it's you're not making any profit.
Yeah. So you're seeing the same drive toward butterfat as we are here in the States?
Probably not as extreme towards butterfat as you are in the States, but yes, we are seeing that same move, yeah.
We're changing because historically in the UK the liquid market has been the strong market across the whole of the dairy sector, and Omsco originally sold all of the milk effectively into the liquid marketplace. And as the company has developed and opportunities have developed to enable us to go into processing, we're moving from a liquid market focus within the payment system and the way we have structured our payments to something which reflects the reward for fat and proteins in the products we're producing.
Mm-hmm. And you're also seeing the plant-based beverages pushing the fluid milk out of the marketplace?
It's a major challenge. The organic section in the supermarkets, because the UK is dominated by supermarkets that sell a majority of the milks, that section that used to be purely organic and specialist milks has now been moved into the main milk section and been replaced by plant-based. And plant-based is having quite a significant impact in terms of sales.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing the exact same thing here.
Yeah.
So are you seeing the majorly depressed conventional pricing and gone through in the last 5 years the downturn that we've seen here too?
Certainly conventional has been through another cycle. We've just come off the top of the last cycle and prices are starting to go down. They haven't gone down as much as people expected yet, but I think they are certainly going to. But in the UK, the marketplace has changed because Arla have become a major player in the UK. They're managing 25% of the overall milk in the whole of the country, and they are operating on European pricing, and we are seeing the Arla conventional pricing staying slightly stronger at the moment, whilst the rest of the marketplace is going down, and the economics would suggest the marketplace should be going down as well. So there's a slightly false conventional marketplace just at the moment, but I'm sure that will change.
And are you seeing the mass exit of dairy farmers? Like, I think the numbers here in Wisconsin have been, it averages out to 2 farmers a day have been leaving the business in 2018.
Yes, we're certainly seeing an exit, but probably not at the rate that you're seeing them at the moment. Within Omsco, would have an attrition rate out of the 250 members, we would expect to lose 5 or 6 a year on retirements or ceasing production. This year it's slightly higher, but there have been other elements where people have lost farms to because a lot of them are tenancies in terms of owned by somebody else and rented off of them, and several of our members have lost their tenancies, for instance.
And what would that be going to? Would that be going to development? Or like the landowners, are they deciding to sell off property, or are they just seeing dairy isn't profitable?
In some cases, the landowners are taking the land back in hand, as we would call it, just to have control of it, because under the legislation in the UK, there's quite a bit of protection for tenants, and some of the landlords just want to have the land back so they can do whatever they choose with it.
When did Omsco start? I believe I heard this is the 25th anniversary.
We are coming up, our AGM in October will be the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the creation of Omsco. And it was created by 5 farmers in the early days who decided they would like to go into organic milk production, and created Omsco as a vehicle to try and sell their milk.
The parallels with Organic Valley's origins are very, very similar.
Okay. Are the founding farmers still a part of the co-op?
They are, yes. There are 2 founding farmers that still sit on the board.
And so the business has gone from something which started around a kitchen table to a £100 million turnover business that we have today.
That's really neat. And you're seeing it thriving, and that's keeping the next generation of farmers interested, because you can actually make a living on the farm. I think that's what's so exciting when you see something like Omsco and Organic Valley is working, and it shows when the next generation wants to stay involved in farming.
We're certainly seeing that, but we're also seeing quite a few farms where children have left the farm, gone to the city or elsewhere to make a career, and then when they get to their early 30s have decided they've had enough of working off of the farm and are actually coming back, and they are proving very effective farmers. They're coming back with a completely different mindset and driving the businesses on again.
New set of skills. Yeah. Definitely, we've seen that, and that's very often the New Zealand model as well. They'll go and work in banks, work in various different industries, and come back and make very professional farmers.
Because if you grow up on a farm and you're on the farm your whole life, it's hard to look at it as running a business per se, because it's your life. But when you see that farmer that worked, ran a different business coming back, he comes in with a completely fresh slate and basically a new set of eyes to see what he's doing.
That's very true. I was born on a farm. I left school at 16 to go farming because my father was ill, and so I farmed for many years. Didn't work off of the farm. I've subsequently worked off of the farm for 20 years, and I know now I would make twice the farmer I made at the time, simply because I would come in with a different set of eyes and with experience.
Yeah, I think we've seen the same thing with our field staff that works here, is that we've got a lot of retired farmers or existing farmers, and just getting out and seeing the different practices and getting off the farm, that's tough to do when you're farming, as you guys well know. And just opening eyes and seeing a brand new thing. And I think we've seen the same thing with the next generation coming back as well, that a lot of times that 20-year-old doesn't, there is no value to them for farming, but then all of a sudden they get some out of farm experiences, and then it looks enticing to be your own boss again and make your own decisions, and it's a big benefit to the farm coming back too.
I think where we see that a lot is young couple, once they have kids that are 5-6 years old, they realize there is no better place to raise a child than on a farm, and I think that's what kind of brings some of them back.
In the UK, we've also got something called Nuffield scholarships and various other different travelling scholarships, that farmers who grow up on the farm and stay on the farm, when they get to sort of late 20s up to mid 40s, they can apply for a Nuffield scholarship and go and actually travel. And both Tim and I took this route, and it's a good way to open your eyes. You've done farming for 10 or so years, and then you can go and do a scholarship where you can travel to other countries. So my first experience of Organic Valley was coming here in '99 after a Nuffield scholarship, and I travelled all across the States, Canada, and New Zealand and Europe. And that is a fantastic way to actually go away and spend some time and come back with new thoughts, new ideas and new practices, and then reinvigorate the farm. So after you've been there for 10 years, it can get a little bit stale. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really, really good system that we have in the UK that quite a lot of farmers take advantage of.
And I'm now involved with the conference this year. It's a really stimulating time when the 20 or so returning scholars give a presentation. So they've been travelling for 8 to 10 weeks to various different parts of the globe, studying all sorts of manner of different things: biological farming, different egg production, different meat scanning varieties of grass, and everything is open to application, because it's more the person they're looking at investing in. So the money for the sponsors is invested in the person to travel. They come back and divest all their information and disseminate it out to the agricultural industry as a whole, and it opens a huge amount of doors to people to experience different things. So I ended up having tea with the British ambassador in Buenos Aires on my Nuffield scholarship, which was completely out of the blue, not organised, great fun, a whole different experience, and ended up visiting apple growers in Nelson, New Zealand, to talk about their discussion group, which they'd just set up, which was revolutionising how they interacted with one another. And the problems that exist in the UK, in America, in South America, in Australasia are all the same. We're coping with all the same issues, and it's wonderful to be able to contact those people and bring back new ways of approaching different and old problems.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really neat, because if you've been on the farm, like you said, for 10 years and it's getting a little bit stale, but you have that farming knowledge, so when you go out, you're going to notice things that if you did that travel when you were 20, you wouldn't pick up on some of these things. But with the farming background, now that is really neat.
You've got the base knowledge, and then you can build on that. So it's, for me, one of the things that I did after coming back from my Nuffield is I went organic, and totally developed the business in a completely different light. But also, it's the people you mix with. So the actual group, the Nuffield group, there's probably 20 people in your year all studying together, and you're not only learning more about your own subject, you're learning a lot about yourself as well, and that's that self-development that's really important at that stage.
And it does create an awful lot of leaders. I probably wouldn't be sat here now if I hadn't have done a Nuffield scholarship. It gives you confidence to get out, experience new methods of doing things, changing your farming business, and learning from others with a more of an open perspective, taking in the periphery of, well, they're doing things differently. How is it working for them? I know there's a lot of farmers who are really good at finding new techniques themselves, but this opens your eyes.
Mm-hmm. And I think with my job as field staff for the farmers, there's so many little things that farmers do differently, and I love when I can grab a piece of that and then tell another farmer about it and connect those two together to do something that's unique.
Yes, that's self-help.
Yeah. Because I'm not the one that's doing it, but I know the person who is, and I'll get you two together, then you can, because you'll believe another farmer way before you believe me. So
that's the strength of the discussion group mentality as well, and we've implemented that, and we've got a grazing discussion group locally that has a real strong organic element, but also has a conventional element, which I'm worried they're catching up on some of our best and brightest ideas. But we learn a huge amount from our monthly discussion group meetings on farms, and there'll be 20 to 30 farms there, and it's the walking between the field, chatting with your other organic friend going, well, have you had a problem with this, and how are you combating the weather we're having at the moment? Well, we're trying this sort of grazing technique and it's working for us. Don't, whatever you do, go down that road, Tim. That hurt me, and we lost a lot of money doing that. And then we have the sex semen debate, and then we go on to. So it's a wonderful way of getting new ideas within the group.
And it's always great to get new ideas from people who aren't trying to sell you something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah.
Vested interest is is one of the problems on a lot of farms.
Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes I had a meeting with, I think 43 farmers showed up to the meeting, and each one had 5 minutes to talk about their last year. One thing that worked, one thing that didn't work, and something they would like to try new, and then there was discussion surrounding it. And one of the young farmers made a comment afterwards. He said, I learned way more about what I can't afford to try than I did on the things that worked. Because there were different ideas that he had, but he said, I am not in a financial position to take a risk to do that. And he heard 3 farmers say they tried it and it just didn't work. So sometimes learning what to not do, a mistake to not do, is more valuable than, listen to somebody that everything works perfect.
Yes, yeah. We do the same with our farm staff. We call them our plan, do, review meetings. So we sit down before we start calving. If we've got new members of the team, we'll plan what happened last year and how things worked well. We'll then go through and do it, and then we'll review after, and we'll ask them for 5 things that went well and 5 things that they would like to improve. And that works really effectively because they feel involved, and then we'll try and implement some of their new ideas as well. So we ought to sort these things out. That's a good idea.
So I know this isn't at least Lyndon, your first time. I think, Peter, you've been around the States before. Just kind of some of the differences and similarities in farming practices as you've gotten out on farms, as far as grazing practices and grass varieties, that kind of thing. What do you see? What have you seen?
Well, in the UK, we're much more sort of perennial ryegrasses and clovers. So probably 90% more is that. Whereas over here I'm seeing, depending on which part of the States I'm in, if I'm on the West Coast or Central or East Coast, there's all different grasses, different forages, different feeds being available, depending on the climatic conditions of those areas. So the UK is quite a small place compared to the US, so it'd just be like comparing parts within the same state, if you like. So you've still got variations within the state, but not like you have across all of the states. So certainly, if you're out west, then water is the issue. Whereas if you're in this sort of east, then it's less of a problem. So it very much depends on where you are and what suits your system. But I think the thing that is the same is farmers' passion for their system. And if they've got that passion and drive, they will make a system that suits them on their farm. And that's the same across any farming system wherever you travel. The ability to make it work is down to the farmer. And if they've got that passion and drive, they'll make their system work.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that strikes me while I've been over here, particularly out on farm, is the weather and the difference in the weather that you have to cope with compared to us. Having stood in a field it was snow in -15 with Dan when we were travelling around last year, I suddenly realised just what extremes you do deal with and the challenges that must face you. We had snow a year ago in March, which brought the whole of the country to a standstill for only a few days, and what you would consider to be relatively mild. So I think is what you're dealing with in terms of the extremes of weather. We have a much more temperate climate that we're dealing with.
Do you deal with a lot of heat during the summer then, heat stress on cattle, or do you not?
Heat stress is an issue in the UK, but not like it is over here. We don't get the very high temperatures for the length of time that you do. I mean, last year was a dry and a hot year for us, but I mean, parts of the States would be much, much hotter.
I guess I don't really look at our climate as that harsh, and then I go 2 hours north, I hear they were expecting 30 inches of snow on Friday. And I'm like, why would you live there? But then you probably look at where I live. Oh, those extremes. It's terrible.
I think that it's certainly most everything I've seen that you're coping with is more extreme than we have to cope with. And I think it's just a variation where we are not used to having the extremes of temperature or cold that you have over here in various areas. So I think that's a fundamental difference, and that seems to be, and that obviously affects the way you farm and what you're able to do.
Mm-hmm. And because you don't get the extreme heat, that's why the ryegrasses would work good for you.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no point in if you're in an area where you do get that heat, then they're obviously not that they're not designed for that job. But in the UK does very, very well with ryegrasses.
Mm-hmm.
We've certainly seen in the East Anglia of the UK, which tends to be the drier part and maybe slightly warmer. That's where the cereals are now grown, and we've seen it's all of the dairy production moving much more towards the west of the whole of the UK.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did want to ask about is also on the business and farm side. When we had the regional understanding tour, there was a group from Omsco that came that through the Midwest, and I was chatting with those folks, and one thing that I was very much different than what we do around anywhere in the States is that a lot of milk is being sold to local markets that these farmers have developed, and then the balance is being shipped to Omsco. Do you guys, as farmers, do that, and how does Omsco deal with that imbalance of unknown? I'm sure kind of what kind of volume are going to be shipped to Omsco, but
Omsco are unusual in the UK in so much as we encourage and support members who wish to sell milk themselves. Most of the dairy companies would refuse to do it, and it would be breach of contract to do so. We're very happy to work with members. It's growing the organic marketplace and the locality. Certainly in the UK, we're seeing a growth in local provenance. There seems to be sales are growing locally, so we support people doing it. The only thing we request of people is that they ensure that what they're selling doesn't cause disruption to our collection route. So if you're selling milk, providing we know that an amount will be going each day, so we can collect a relatively standard amount from the farm, then that's fine. The big issue would come where somebody was wanting us to collect all of their milk one day and then none the next, because that causes huge disruption to transport. So some of those who have bigger businesses and are selling larger volumes, they actually send in they book in each week with the volumes they're going to have each week. So we control it and manage it, but we're very happy to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's a good system because it helps to develop the organic market locally, and organic is a market, but local is also a market. So local organic is a new niche.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what kind of got me a little bit excited talking with those folks when they were talking about the development. I can't remember the two guys' name that I was talking to mostly, but one had a larger farm and he was supplying a lot of fluid milk to, I think, like a hospital and a school. And then there was another guy that had a smaller farm and he was doing, I can't remember, it was like a...
Well, we've got vending machines. Was that on-farm vending machines? So at the end of the track, some of our members now have machines where the members of the public can come and refill their bottles with milk.
So they bring a glass bottle along and press a button, and they can get fresh milk put straight into their own bottle.
Is that a raw milk, or does that have to be pasteurized?
Some people are doing it raw. We tend to prefer they do it as pasteurized.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they would have to get the licensing to be a processor for that milk, or
they have to be regulated by the local authority.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not like a processing. If it's selling your own milk from your own farm, the standards are still severe, but they're not prohibitively severe.
Okay.
But the reality is that people tend to be selling a gently pasteurized product, so it's pasteurized over a period of half an hour or so to quite a low temperature. So actually what that does is it actually creates a different taste. And that's what's people come and buy it once because it's they're having a glass bottle and it's different, and the kids come along, but they'll come back again if it tastes different, and that's what is growing the market.
But it's giving them access to whole milk, which in the UK you don't normally have access to whole milk. You have access to milk which has a proportion of the fat removed from it, or a lot of the fat taken from it, and in many cases homogenised, which would be the norm. So therefore, a lot of the farmers or the members are telling us that their customers are talking about the taste of milk as it used to be.
Because your whole milk in the store would be 325, or what percent fat is your whole milk?
3.5.
3.5.
That would be considered a whole milk.
A whole milk, yeah.
Yeah, and then the remainder has been taken off by the dairy. So
the whole milk that I drink was 6.9.
Yeah.
I get it from my brother-in-law with jerseys. about 4 inches of cream on a gallon jug. Perfect for coffee.
You do not see any cream on the top of milk that you've bought from a supermarket.
All homogenized.
All homogenized, yeah.
Which there's some local companies, like there's a glass bottle one local where I live. There's two actually. One's organic, one's non-GMO, and they're both cream on top.
Yeah. We run a small farm shop at home, and we sell our own meats and fruits and veggies and things. But the one thing that we do sell is we sell a local milk, which is non-homogenized, and there are people that travel a long way to buy that because it's not available in the regular retail outlets.
And I can see, people that grew up on a farm going back and getting that milk that's not homogenized. It takes them back to the childhood of how the milk tasted on the farm.
Absolutely, and that's the sort of feedback we're getting all the time. So that's an area where our members are able to sell not huge volumes, but certainly a proportion of their milk, perhaps 5 or 10% of their total milk supply.
The other thing that does is it starts to re-educate the public as well. So in the UK, we're looking at trying to get the public out on farms as much as possible to try and educate them about what really happens on farms, because there's a lot of propaganda lobby groups, the vegans, etc., that are trying to create this image of farming that if we don't do something to put that right, no one else is going to do it for us. So if we can sell milk from the end of a farm drive and it tastes totally different to anything else they can buy, if we can have days where we bring the public out onto farms, the one thing that's been very successful in the UK has been the Open Farm Sunday, which is there's one Sunday in the year where a lot of farms throw their doors open and the public come in,
9th of June.
It's incredibly successful because you can show people how it really is. And I think you have sort of pumpkin days and things where you get people out on farms, but if you can get people and you have your parlour running and you're milking cows and they can stand on the one side and see what's going on, then the children are coming to see it, but it's the parents you're educating.
We volunteered for the 9th of June Open Farm Sunday this year, and expecting the village and surrounding area to descend upon us and tractor ride, see the cows being milked, and then the following day, unbeknown to us, we've got booked for a school coming round from the local city with a chef coming, so they're going to come and cook some food and taste some organic food, and then the following day we've got another school coming round. We've really set ourselves a busy week that week in June. So looking forward to taking them round and showing them round.
Because I think if you can get those people out on farms and have them see how a farm that's run in the way that a farm should be run, it really opens their eyes. Because just like you said, the propaganda sells a lot better than the actual story would.
The thing is that we're not putting our side of the argument very well. So the vegan lobby are actually doing a really good job of actually getting their view as this is the fact, and it's not a fact, it's just their twisted view of it.
Well, they do it on emotion. That's really, and they can capture, especially people that are 2 or 3 generations removed from a farm. You talk about ripping calves away from mama, or you talk about burning a calf's horn off, that kind of thing. It doesn't sound good. So of course they're going to demonize it, and they've done a very good job, and so you are dealing with the same animal care things that we are you having to deal with like third-party verifications and animal care standards and all these new regulations that are coming along to keep ahead of the ball?
Yeah, we have some fairly intensive animal care standards in the UK. There's a national standard which is sort of the minimum, and then there's other standards which go above it. The one thing that I fell foul of is we have something that we call Dancing Cow Day, which is something that we brought in from Denmark. This is standard practice on all organic farms in Denmark. When they're going to turn the cows out, the cows sort of dance and skip and have a great time. And it's a really, farmers love to see that day, and everybody loves to see it. So we actually invite all of our local members of the general public along, bring the families along, and actually just experience that with us. That upset the sort of pressure groups and the vegan lobby, because actually we're telling people something that they didn't think was right. So we had a lot of aggravation for that on social media, but actually it was still a great day.
So what did they go after?
They went after the fact that this is all rubbish. Animals never go outside.
Well, I was actually in Denmark on the Regional Understanding Tour in Scandinavia 2 years ago, and they talked about the turnout day or the cow dancing day, and thousands of people,
thousands and thousands,
show up to watch, because there's nothing that cheers you up more than actually seeing that. Cows out on grass for the first time, the tail straight in the air, and it's a great day. I think it's really neat that you're doing that too.
It's a fantastic day, and I think it's something that organic, it's another point of difference that we're not selling well enough.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the organic sector has been targeted just recently by vegans and pressure groups, and they're doing secret filming on farms. They've been creeping on farms, making films, and then editing them in such a way that it makes it look a lot worse than it is. In many cases, it's perfectly acceptable practices, but made to look very bad, and so that's a real challenge we have as well.
Well, there was just one released here in the States, a video, undercover video, and it showed a really lame cow, but it's just that one little clip of a really lame cow. Well, you don't know, was that cow being chased into a pen to be treated and taken care of, or was she actually mistreated? I mean, human beings sprain their ankles too and limp, so you don't know the whole story. Yeah. And that's where I think if we can get the consumer to have that relationship with a farmer, because once the consumer knows you and knows what your farming practices are, you've got a consumer for life if they know you're doing it right. Because nobody should mistreat animals. That is not acceptable. It's not okay on a dairy farm. It's not okay anywhere. But just because a cow is lame doesn't mean she was being mistreated.
No, but filmed in an inappropriate way and set in the wrong context, it doesn't look as it is.
Yeah.
That goes back to the selling on emotion.
Indeed.
And they can capture people's attention quite easily by just a 10-second clip of something nasty that looks nasty, but don't know the whole story. And that's their job, I guess. That's what they do. So it's hard to battle, but as far as the animal care stuff, the hard part is you can get on a slippery slope pretty quickly. We want to make sure that everything's being done properly. We want to make sure there are standards in place that everybody's following, but then eventually, like we're dealing with it right now, the bending towards the animal rights folks, and eventually you wind up in a position, and this is a concern for a lot of the farmers I talk to, that are we going to go down this slippery slope that eventually practices are going to be required that are no longer economical on the farm.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge we would see and recognize.
But I don't know if there's an answer.
I think if you have an answer, I think we'd be very grateful to hear it.
Yeah, I think whoever comes up with that answer is going to be a very wealthy man. No. Going back to the selling the milk to your local market, now is that in the farmer's own brand, or is that under the Omsco label?
This is something that's still being developed at the moment. So currently the farmers are selling it themselves.
Okay.
But we believe that there's probably a market to actually have a brand, because when a farmer is just selling small quantities of milk, the setting up of the brand and the social media and everything is really, really hard. But actually that's something that that the co-op may be able to help with.
Okay. So they could get, let's say, cartons or jugs for the milk with the Omsco label on it, but still do, because that would give brand awareness to you.
It
Yes,
was,
yeah.
and it's a point of difference. Yeah,
We're looking at the possibility of creating something a bit like a franchise, where we can give people all the infrastructure and support they need to do it.
Yeah, the fellow I was talking to on the rut tour, he had a daughter that was coming back. Similar like we were talking earlier. She had worked off farm in the city, and then she came back and developed the website and was trying to promote this brand. But he was saying how difficult it is to really get the name out there of such a, it's a brand new thing. You have to spend money to get the name out there, and for a small farmer, that just isn't viable.
no, where the cooperative could help with that is you're spending it once. So designing bottles and labels and packaging and all of that marketing, so much of that money can only be spent once rather than being spent once on every single farm. So we believe that could be something good for the future.
We're also seeing a move away from plastic bottles as well. I've got a friend who bottles water, and the Blue Planet David Attenborough series has there's a lot of pressure on people for how they package materials, how they sell it, and plastic pollution is going to become an even worse problem than it is now. So they're getting a backlash from consumers about bottled plastic water. So the vending machines in glass, and my sister, they sell through a vending machine their milk, and they get repeat customers coming back with their own glass bottles, and it's a family outing. Go and get some milk.
It's kind of like history is somewhat repeating itself. We're going back to the days of milk delivery and getting milk from your neighbor, and that's not a bad thing for the industry that we're trying to promote. It's not a good thing for the conventional side where they're trying to mass produce.
No, it feeds into our point of difference. So
Exactly.
if it's something that's working in our favour, I think we should use it.
And I think we have to, like you mentioned earlier, Lyndon, that organics has to do a better job of talking about what it is that makes us different.
Definitely.
We've got to be a little more boastful. Spread the word and not be proud of it. Like, differentiate yourself to the people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that is difficult because whether you're an organic farmer or a conventional farmer, you're still a farmer. And there's a fine line between selling the benefits of your system and attacking your neighbours. And it's not an easy area for conversation, but there's got to be a good, happy medium line through there where we actually are selling the benefits of our system.
The hard part right now that we're dealing with here in the States is that organic has started to draw a little bit of bad press, bad name, bad reputation just from the size of the farms that have come online, especially on the West Coast. And so, that's where branding can come in and differentiating. But it's all getting lumped in together, and we're dealing with the fallout of, that there's a 2,000 cow, or right now there's just approval for a 4,000 cow facility in Northeast Indiana, and it's going to be organic. And when they go down that road, it's kind of like, well, then what's the difference? Why would, a consumer might say, why would I spend extra to get exactly what I would off of a 10,000 cow conventional farm?
This is something I saw when I was out here on my Nuffield scholarship back in '99. I went to a farm in Idaho where they were milking 5,000 cows. The cattle never went outside. It was called organic, but they never ever went outside to graze. There's got to be a way of actually bringing grazing into the standards and actually having a meaning for what organic is, which seems to be what's currently lacking.
Well, there is. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, sir, it's something certainly that many of the members in the UK struggle with. It's hard enough to manage the grazing and do it effectively under an organic system with 300 or 400 cows, and they can't really conceive how it's possible to do it on a farm of that scale. And in the UK, we talk about factory farms, and that's there's quite a challenge, and has been for years, against the conventional sector in some of the very big farms. And also there's a perception from the UK that in America you have these huge mega farms, and question about their viability and welfare and everything else.
It's not perception, it's reality. I mean, and the farms are getting bigger and bigger every day. Nowadays, if you're under, it used to be 500 to 2,000 cows was a huge dairy. And these days that they're not even viable anymore, because they're competing against the 5, 10, 15, up to 40,000 cow facilities that, do economies of scale, and how do you battle that? It just keeps on, it's growing on itself right now, the problem is.
There is a limit to number of cows that you can graze on one herd, though, and I think that ought to start to have more play in organic standards.
Well, it's got the 30% dry matter from pasture rule is in, but how well it's being enforced by the certifiers is a little bit of contention right now, because there's big herds that say that they are well over the 30% dry matter that's required, and the certifier says they are. So, what do you do? I think there needs to be more auditing done to make sure that they're meeting the organic standard. And if it's not, that's where I think we need, as Organic Valley needs to separate itself from within. We need to differentiate ourselves from the organic market, because all players are no longer equal. When you look at the players that have come into the organic market, there are some that we don't want to. I realize a rising tide raises all ships, but there are some ships we might not want to raise up with us.
But the opposite is true, and I'm sure you guys, well, that would be a question for you as Omsco. Like, one of the things that we're dealing with is, I totally agree, differentiation, and how do we combat the organic people that aren't doing it properly? Because if we go out and we just bash them, the only thing that hurts is everybody. Everybody in the organic industry gets a bad name by bashing individual farmer. So it's like they need to get called out, they need to get policed properly, but the publicity side of it is kind of a touchy area.
It is a problem, because you can have somebody outside of your group, somebody outside of Omsco, for instance, who can have a problem, but then the danger is it's the whole organic sector that gets blamed for it. We certainly, as a business, believe our priority is to ensure that we are doing everything to the best of our ability, and we're looking at raising our individual standard over and above the organic standard to try and move forward, so that any product come from Omsco can be demonstrated to be reduced to a higher level even than the standard organic.
So what are the things you're looking at possibly doing to?
We're looking at a whole raft of things, not least ensuring that animal welfare practices, quality, are all done to a standard which would be in excess of what you would be normally certifying for. So we are just in striving for quality and best practice in all areas.
And also, people sort of lump together animal health and animal welfare, and I think they're actually two separate things. And animal health, a lot of the animals on a large conventional housed unit can be healthy, but the animal welfare of that lifestyle for those animals is much more questionable. And that's the bit that I think that there should be more pointed out about what's actually different. And actually these cattle graze for 200 days or 180 days or whatever is actually a point of difference, because that's something that not everybody can say.
And we're looking at health status. I mean, Yonis is a classic example which Lyndon's quite involved in, where we are looking to have a much enhanced Yonis status within our membership and other diseases.
Yeah, one of the things we've looked at is upping the grazing standards. I think the hard part there is how do you communicate that to a consumer in a way that is a selling point.
I think where you've got a really good advantage is you do have a brand, and your brand already you put on the label no antibiotics, no pesticides, no sort of the things that you always do and the things that you never do, and that is actually something that is a really good start. That's certainly well above where we are in the UK. We never put on the label free from pesticides, just because the organic industry in the UK hasn't done that. So there's something we've probably got to learn from you guys.
The organic industry can still use pesticides?
No, we don't use them, but we don't tell people we don't use them. And that's the difference. The people, unless you tell them really clearly, they don't understand. We're often guilty of presuming people understand something without actually explaining it.
Mm-hmm. We also have legislation which challenges what we're able to say on labels as well, which restricts us in some areas that you may be able to say slightly more than we're allowed to say.
Mm-hmm. So in Europe, there's a slogan that's approved Europe-wide. So the other 26 countries in Europe can all use this slogan, and that's organic, good for you and good for the environment. The UK will not let us use that terminology because they say it's not proven. Well, it's proven in the rest of Europe. That's a UK government thing that actually does not want to differentiate organic from conventional.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I can imagine where the lobbying efforts came from.
There's some good lobbying going on, yes. Unfortunately, not from us.
Right.
Yeah, not from the organic side. So have you, was that 2015 when the partnership with Organic Valley?
Yep.
Was it 2015?
Yes.
And has that changed? Has it been positive, negative, indifferent? Has it changed anything really with what you guys do?
I think certainly we believe it's been very positive, not least commercially. We've worked together commercially, which has been positive. But certainly the relationship between the membership and the exchange visits, etc., people have thoroughly enjoyed that, and they've enjoyed understanding how, the differences, but also the similarities of what we do. And I think there's a lot of synergy between the two co-ops. We've come from a similar origin. We have the same ethics and ethos, and it feels we're working closer and closer together. And certainly our membership see the link with Organic Valley has been a very important part of what we do.
On the membership side, certainly we can learn from you and you can learn from us, and let's just share that knowledge that we've got about different areas about organic farming for each other's benefit, because we're not competitors here. We are the same genuine organic farmers with the same genuine organic beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That does bring up one thing on farming practices that I did want to make sure we touched on. You mentioned growing some small grains, and then I heard both of you say growing and feeding beets. We don't have it is available, but a lot of times it's pulp, and it's not very widely available organically, especially. How do you feed that? What are the benefits, and are you growing them yourself? All those questions.
We've bought them in for the last 2 years. We've had various problems with quality and continuation of supply with that. So this year we're going to try growing them ourselves. So I'm not an expert, but the benefits of feeding it when it's a good product is animal intake. So cows will eat more. They do love beet. And if it's the fodder beet style, you can feed them whole, or you can chop them or break them. If it's the more sugar beet style, so they're the more higher dry matter, then it does require some extra processing to break them up down to a size that the animal can digest. But certainly an intake, if you put a bit of beet in the ration, that's the bit that will get eaten first. They absolutely love it. And although it is an energy source, because of the way that the sugar feeds the rumen bacteria, you're feeding a quite low protein feed, but because it stimulates production of rumen bacteria, obviously rumen bacteria's life cycle, when they die, that's very high quality of protein being fed into the animal. So actually we are finding them a balanced food for energy and protein, but certainly really good for intake, really good for animal health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're finding the same as well, that fodder beet adds significantly to the ration. We're feeding it whole. It's about 18% dry matter when we've dried it in the cooker on my wife's baking tray, chopped them up, dried them down to get a figure for how much we were feeding. And the cows go absolutely wild for it. It'll be the first thing they run towards. We'd like to make more use of the tops. Some people lift them with the tops. Some people graze them in situ. We do outwinter animals and young stock on fodder turnips and kale, and that works very effectively when the weather conditions allow. But fodder beet brings that sugar, that alternative extra dry matter intake into our dairy system, and they love it.
So you're growing them?
We're buying it from a neighbouring farm who's contract growing it for us, with good agronomy. They have more machinery experience than I do, more ability to weed it, look after it agronomically, and we'd love to grow it, and we did grow it 20 years ago, and I can remember as a teenager chopping it up in front of the cows by hand with a four-sided spade for 100 cows, chopping it all up so they wouldn't choke on it. But to be honest, we've not had any problems this winter feeding fodder beet. They'll nibble away quite happily, and I think feeding it whole, it lasts longer. They're less likely to have problems with too high intake.
Mm-hmm.
So how big are these beets? Like what size?
2.5 kilos. They'd be a rugby ball size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Wow.
So what kind of soils do they need to be grown in, and what kind of harvesting equipment, if you're going to, I know you're not growing them, but having the neighbor nearby, what kind of...
Yeah, the neighbour's only a mile away, and he'll grow them using laser-guided hose to weed them. I think he's building one of these little trays where they lie down on mattresses to just weed in between, and then they'll harvest it with a top pulling single row Armour salmon, is it, harvester, which harvests the whole lot in a sandy light loam soil. But it will grow, and we have grown them at home on slightly heavier soils, but easier harvested in a lighter soil and in dry conditions in October.
Mm-hmm.
They want a sort of a lime-neutral type of soil, really, and they also need some salt added to the soil, so they really benefit from some salt put on when they're planted.
And the fodder beet is giving an option for two of our retiring members. We don't have a grower pool or anything, so same way as you do, but we've got two retiring members who wanted to stay part of Omsco, who wanted to continue farming, and they're going to grow fodder beet on contract to other members.
So do you see a butterfat increase by feeding beets?
If it was balanced properly, it would be helpful, but not massively.
Okay.
But probably total weight of butterfat, yes, but probably more in extra milk.
Sure.
Well, is there anything else you guys would like to touch on yet while we have you here?
Just to say how much we're enjoying being here and meeting all the members, and it just continues to reinforce there are more similarities and differences between us.
Well, I want to thank you guys so much for being here. This is really exciting. This is definitely outside of the norm for Brian and I to have the opportunity to sit down with organic farmers from England. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.